So, Luke, it seems like you made a bit of an oopsie in our last recording. So would you like to tell everyone how much of a failure you are?
Yeah, unfortunately, I accidentally deleted my recording of our Bill and Ted review. It was probably the best review we have ever done on a movie. And, it's such a shame because Bill and Ted was a defining movie for a generation of people. And for people not to know our thoughts on that movie, yeah, it's very sad. But we tried to upload the Skype recording because we back up our recordings through Skype, but the quality was just absolutely terrible. So I made the sad decision to delete the recording. So no one will now ever know what we thought of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
That's fine. I mean, it is very sad, but I guess ultimately, I think we should also ignore the changes in the receipts competition, in the guessing the Rotten Tomatoes score competition, because I believe you pulled ahead quite substantially, if I remember correctly. So I think we should discount that, seeing as it's no longer part of the equation.
I disagree. I think we should do that another time. Yeah. So we'll hash that out later.
Okay. Also, in the what I was thinking about was in the Simpsons, where Marge has a gambling problem, and Homer says, basically, he's like, anytime he's bringing up all these things he's done that are wrong in the past, he's like, yeah, but you have a gambling problem. I was thinking that's basically how it's going to be with us. Whenever I make any kind of technical error, I'm going to be like, yeah, well, you deleted your recording of Bill and Ted, and you won't have any retort. So,
yeah, that's going to happen. Fuck. Anyway, let's get on with Braveheart.
Yes. Speaking of technical failures, have you seen Braveheart? Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past, we give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke, and this week we are celebrating the 25-year, count 'em, 25-year anniversary of Mel Gibson's classic film Braveheart. And also I believe you said last time that there is some kind of Scottish celebration today, so obviously the people of Scotland love this film, so that would make sense we'd be talking about it today. But Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about Braveheart?
Well, I think I got it wrong, Michael, and I'll explain later what I actually meant by that. But yes, we shall be doing a review of Braveheart today, and Braveheart is a 1995 American. Huh? Now, I mean, that's just...
Gasp.
The company that made it was from America. Epic historical fiction war film. Did they put... Really? Fiction? Wow. I've never seen that before. They actually put fiction in that. That's crazy.
It's a good thing they didn't do that with Passion of the Christ, because that would have caused some controversy.
Oh, I know, for sure. Braveheart was directed and co-produced by Mel Gibson, who portrays William Wallace, a late 13th century Scottish warrior. Like I said, it also stars Mel Gibson, Sophie McCrew, Patrick McGowan, and Catherine McCormack. It was released on May the 24th, 1995 in the United States, and I believe it was released around this time in September in Scotland. I believe that's the case, judging by the articles I have seen. So we actually are pretty much doing a 25-year anniversary, celebration.
Yeah. Usually we're just trying to fill in the gaps with these films that came out X number of years ago, but this time it actually was around this time.
Yeah, exactly. See, the thing is, I saw on the release date, May the 24th, 1995, United States, but judging by the articles I've read, it literally came out 25 years ago today, or yesterday, in Scotland. Anyway, the budget for Braveheart, Michael, can you guess it? What was it?
I don't know. I would think this was quite a lot, because it looks like a quite expensive film. Lots of grand set pieces. So let's go for something that feels like a big number, I don't know, 65 million.
That is a fantastic guess.
Hey!
65 to $70 million. Yeah, incredible. And how much did it make at the box office?
Again, I don't know how much of a massive hit. I think this film was probably a very big hit, but I don't know what very big hit means. I'm going to go for what feels like a decent number for a bit. But I feel like this could be one of the situations where I'm so far off, because I'm going for what feels like a decent number for kind of a war epic, which to me I feel would be kind of 300 million. But I could almost see you saying actually it's way up close to $1 billion or something, but I'm going to go for 300 million.
Well, yes, you are right. It is nowhere near $1 billion. This is, after all, a historical war epic, not a Marvel movie, Michael.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, over $1 billion back then in the 90s would have been crazy. It only made $213 million. So,
okay.
Yeah, not that far off by 300, but yeah, I was actually surprised it didn't make as much as it did, considering, it was a big movie that is well, the reason why we're doing it today, it still has a lot of cultural significance.
And also, actually, I guess part of it I had in my head Passion of the Christ, which of course made, 600 million?
Did it make that much?
I feel like Passion of the Christ, famously, because it wasn't Passion of the Christ the highest grossing R-rated film of all time until Deadpool.
Yes.
So I remember Passion of the Christ made, bank, and obviously there's different reasons for that, but I was thinking maybe there would be some kind of thing where it would make, I shouldn't have said close to $1 billion because I didn't really mean that, but maybe like 550 million, which would be almost twice as much as 300 million. Anyway.
Well, the difference is that William Wallace isn't Jesus, but don't tell that to Mel Gibson. The film grossed 75.6 million in the United States and 210 million worldwide, and at the 68th Academy Awards, the film was nominated for 10 and won 5, including Best Picture. So this won Best Picture, Michael. Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Makeup, and Best Sound Effects Editing. And we shall go through later whether it deserved any of those. So, Michael, a historical war epic, won an Academy Award. Surely this is right up your street. Did you like Braveheart?
I guess the only question is how much did I dislike it? I didn't really like it, no. Is the answer. I didn't hate it. I wasn't sat with a burning passion, but to me it kind of felt like just... I think about there was this film, you get like those weird films like... it's kind of weird I'm thinking about this, but like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and like Solomon Kane and Hansel and Gretel.
Yes.
Like these kind of just whatever films where it's kind of like, it's entertaining because it's a guy with a sword, fighting loads of baddies or whatever, but obviously there's not really much to it, and that's kind of how I felt about this film. So yeah. What did you think?
It was okay, but then you read the historical inaccuracy part and you're like, oh my god. And I kind of knew that going in anyway. And it's similar to Bohemian Rhapsody in that respect, although I think Bohemian Rhapsody, because it's very recent history, people involved in that are still alive today, that's why it's more egregious, the historical inaccuracy. But anyway, let's get into nitpicks and litpicks. And I say litpicks because I don't have any nitpicks, but I have a litpick. So what about you, Michael?
Oh, blimey, you don't have any nitpicks. I've got 4. All quite quick, but no litpicks. So
you go first and be quick.
Yeah, some of these are whatever. We've got loads. We should say the historical accuracy is going to be a nice thing, but would Scottish people really use the word pagan as an insult to describe the English? I just thought that was very strange because it's so obviously false that it would feel like a weird thing, and I don't know, so it's kind of a question, but I just thought it seems like a weird thing for somebody to say because obviously they would know everyone's Christian anyway. This one's whatever, but they start in the Battle of Stirling Bridge. The soldiers know that they're going to do negotiating. And they're like, screw this, we're leaving. And it makes literally no sense at all for them to acknowledge the negotiation is going to happen and be like, we're going to leave before the negotiation happens, because obviously that means that if the negotiation did happen, they would be in a much worse situation. So that was stupid. I wasn't sure to put this under historical inaccuracy, but it's just such a common thing. So I just want to bring up here. Battle formations are a thing. They're a pretty fundamental part of an army. And obviously in so many films, you just have a situation where 2 hordes of people run at each other and then they split off all into their own little one-on-one duels with each other. When obviously really it will be a much more boring case of people marching forward in these strict formations. And it wouldn't be as exciting or cinematic, but it would be more accurate. And obviously, I know we're going to talk about historical inaccuracy later, but I just thought it's such a common thing if I bring it up there. And this one's the worst one. Mel Gibson says, or Braveheart, whatever his name, William Wallace says, he hasn't been given anything. God makes men what they are. This is, of course, in reference to when he thought he was given the title of knight. But if God makes people what they are, then he would have been given something, because he would have been given something by God. And then I put as a little aside, I put, oh wait, he's a Catholic, which is of course in reference to the fact that Catholics notoriously do not frame grace from God as a gift. And that was one of the leading causes of the Reformation of whether or not grace from God is a gift. So
shut up. Your anti-Catholic bias is horrendous.
I would like on record, okay, if Mel Gibson was, an evangelical Protestant, I'd make fun of him for that too. It's just because, it's not Catholicism's fault that Mel Gibson is a crazy Catholic person.
Okay, right.
I just think it's funny.
We're not in Passion of the Christ anymore.
That was fun. All right. Okay, let's hear your lit pick. Let's hear your positivity, Luke.
Okay, so this wasn't a lit pick really about the movie. It's really about why I chose to do this movie here. And like I said,
I see.
Apparently it's it was released 25 years ago in Scotland, judging by the articles I've been reading, but also the reason why I wanted to do it in September, because I thought there was a special day in Scotland in September, and I was correct. It is the date that the Scottish independence referendum is in, or the month it is in.
Ah, lovely.
The actual date is September the 18th. I just remember thinking, there's something about, there's some special day in Scotland in September, right? And lo and behold, yes, the independence referendum, which obviously no lost by about 10%. But given the recent polls, and this is a fascinating thing, it's a really timely podcast, if you will, right now we are doing, Michael, because Scottish independence is on the rise. You've got the Scottish elections. I don't know what they're called specifically, but they're electing for the Scottish Assembly.
Well, they all stand around in their mud huts and shout at each other about who's going to lead Scotland.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get into Scottish independence talk later on. But yes, also this is the third Mel Gibson movie we are doing this year. So shout out Mel Gibson.
Yeah, we love him.
Yeah, we do love him. But anyway, Michael, let us get into the plot of Braveheart. So, William Wallace is a Scottish rebel who leads an uprising against the cruel English ruler, Edward the Longshanks, who wishes to inherit the crown of Scotland for himself. When he was a young boy... I feel
like you're kind of doing a slight accent there. Is that true, or is it just that you're northern?
I can do it.
It was when you said, it sounded like you went, Scotland.
That's just how people pronounce it.
See, I pronounce... Okay, I see. Because you do have that rule, actually. You like to pronounce things how they're pronounced by the people who live in those places.
Yes.
So, I can see why for you it is Scotland.
I can do the whole thing in a Scottish accent if you want.
I'm really bad at accents, so I do enjoy people who are good at them.
When he was a young boy, William Wallace's father and brother, along with many others, lost their lives trying to free Scotland. Once he loses another of his loved ones, William Wallace begins his long quest to make Scotland free once and for all, along with the assistance of Robert the Bruce. And there you go. Boom. Done. Roasted.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's the plot, basically. William Wallace is a freedom fighter against the English, essentially because they kill his wife. So let's get into the start of the movie. Immediately, William Wallace, it portrays him as a kid first for about 20 minutes, I'd say. He sees his father die, and, the fucking Scots, man. The stupid fucking Scots. They're just lured into this trap by the English.
Yeah, dummies.
They deserved it. Everyone come into this little hut. Don't bring your weapons. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And, then they all get hanged. It just once again proves that the Scots are no match for the witty, smart English.
The English were too brave to accept their surrender.
Yes. I did think maybe that what I was thinking, because it was something out of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
So, right at the start, I have to say, I am, and this is going to be a reoccurring theme, I'm a bit confused of what's going on, because this is the first time I watched it, and, I'm not an expert on Scottish history, I have to say, and I didn't really know when stuff was happening. Like, when did the king take over Scotland? Was it immediately after he killed the nobleman? Or was it before? The movie doesn't really specify, and apparently not, according to Wikipedia. He doesn't do it until, much, much later, 15, 16 years later after this incident, which apparently didn't even take place, but we'll get onto the inaccuracies later.
Yeah.
And so, William Wallace comes back around the same time as the king, decided to do this in real life and not previously. And he came back in the middle of a wedding too. So what are the chances, eh? Good for him. But yeah, I just thought that was I don't know about you, but the first 20 minutes I was really like, wait, what's the dynamic at play here? I get obviously the English are being the bad guys. That's pretty clear.
But always.
I'm always interested in the politics of a situation. That's why I was a bit like, what's really going on here? What was I being too stupid? What do you think?
See, unfortunately, I know a lot about history just because, and therefore I already knew the surrounding situation. And for me personally, the main thing I was noticing at the beginning was just all the areas where it didn't line up with the history I already knew. And I guess that's kind of the weird situation, because obviously you're talking about being confused about the history that the film's presenting, which is of course even more complicated by the fact and I know we're going to get into this, which is impossible not to talk about now, which is the fact that the history the film's presenting is not even accurate. But I guess I will say that assuming that you didn't really know anything about this, and I do believe this, okay, and I'll say this now because I think it's something which I want to affirm several points in the future when we do various historical films. I think one of the ways that a historical film can have merit is by functioning in an educational capacity. Because, with most films, you just talk about them, you talk about what are the themes, is it artistically shot, are the characters interesting? Whereas with a historical film, there is another way that I think a historical film can genuinely earn some kudos, and that is to be educational and informative. And obviously this film isn't really, because like you say, and I would imagine this would be the case for pretty much anyone, I'm going to say you're not stupid, I guess, that, it doesn't really set anything up, and there's no real explanation for the whole situation. It's kind of just like, yeah, like all these characters, they're not really contextualized within the wider situation.
Yeah, that's what
I guess
I'm
that's the
lacking,
point. Yeah,
context. Yeah. And the thing is, like, okay, then you look at Wikipedia for the context, and that context is inaccurate. So that
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the issue.
It's just really bad. But anyway, so Mel Gibson is introduced at this wedding, like I said, and Mel Gibson. This is what I'm going to talk about him, okay? Because obviously this movie is directed by him. It stars him. He's in like almost every scene. So he goes on to marry this woman called Murren. That's how you pronounce it, Murren.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think this is a really good time to point out. Obviously, we'll talk about his accent, but the first thing I noticed is Mel Gibson. He is meant to be playing some guy who's in his mid-20s, perhaps, I think, and he looks about 38 in this movie. And that's because he is 38 in this movie. He was born in 1956, and he filmed this in 1994, so he's 38 years old.
Yeah.
And apparently, according to Wikipedia, he is meant to be playing someone who, let's say he was 12 years old when his dad died. And so in 1297, he comes back. So that's 17 years later. So he's meant to be playing someone who's so about 29 years old. Right?
Yeah.
He looks quite a bit older than that. It's because of the wrinkles on his face. You know, they really stand out. He does not look like someone who's the same age as his wife. And that's because he isn't. Like I said, he would have been 38 when this movie was filmed. The woman who he is marrying, the actress, was 22 when this was filmed. And it shows.
Wow.
Yeah, there is no way they were, like, childhood friends. He literally looks 16 years older than her. Like, not 2 or 3, which would probably be the limit if they were childhood friends. And from what we saw in the movie, by the way, they weren't even friends. She handed him a flower at his dad's funeral. You know, that's not...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's not really friendship. But, like, I was thinking when the girl's dad was talking to Mel Gibson, I was like, they look like the same age. Like, they don't look that different in terms of age. Like, Mel Gibson's going to be playing this young guy who wants to marry this guy's daughter. It's like, they could each be, like, 38 and 40. Like, they should be the childhood friends, not Mel Gibson and this girl. So that was immediately my reaction.
So you want it to be about a guy who wants to marry his childhood friend's daughter?
Yeah,
that's a classic thing we have. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think?
I mean, I agree with you. I don't think that he looks. I don't think he quite looks the part, and I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily a movie breaking thing, but yeah, it is an issue with the casting. And I guess it's kind of strange because obviously Mel Gibson... Well, I mean, I guess there's kind of an unspoken Mel Gibson trilogy in my head, which is Braveheart, Passion of the Christ, and Apocalypto, being like historical films that he directed. And weirdly, he's not in the last two. And maybe they should have had that be the case for all 3 films, where he's not in any of them. And at least that would have made more sense. So yeah.
By the way, like, this whole thing in the 90s, and I learned this from a Simpsons episode, that Mel Gibson was meant to be extremely attractive. And you kind of get that in What Women Want as well, I guess, but you know, it's not that big an issue given that's not what the plot's about. But yeah, like I said, he's got wrinkles, he's got this caveman brow. I don't see how he's attractive, and I think another big issue is his accent, Michael. What do you think of his accent in this movie?
Well, I mean, I thought it was almost as good as yours. So, no, I mean, like, honestly, I will say this, okay, it's kind of strange, but I could tell it was bad. It didn't, like, actively bother me throughout the film, which sounds a bit strange. Like, I'm sure it would actively bother a Scottish person. And I'm not saying, like, I couldn't tell it was bad, because I could. But I was able to kind of just... Because I think it's partly because Mel Gibson is so kind of famous an actor, that because you already know it's Mel Gibson, you're kind of not really expecting him to sound like a Scottish person. But yeah, I will admit it's bad. I guess you're going to probably say that more forcefully now. No,
I would actually agree with you. You summed it up pretty well. It's not actively bad, doesn't piss me off throughout the movie, but if I was Scottish, it probably would. But yeah, it isn't the best. But yeah, it's not movie-breaking. Kind of like his age, it's not movie-breaking, but it's more than a nitpick. It's like, right, this is a flaw in the movie. But they're not so bad that it completely ruins it and like takes you out. But it is pretty noticeable on both counts. His age, like he's like I said, he's 16 years older than his wife, and yeah, he looks it. And the accent, yes, like sometimes you can tell, especially at the start of the movie, it's like, this isn't going to go well. But then you kind of get used to it, and it isn't that big a problem. But anyway, Michael, let's talk about specifically the character he is playing, which is William Wallace. And I have a major problem with William Wallace's motivation in this movie. This is a real sticking point that I have, because first off, you don't even see the moment when Mel Gibson finds out his wife is dead.
Yeah, I found that very strange.
Yeah,
like that kind of thing. I actually did like because obviously I have a slightly longer break between my first watch and my second watch. Well, I have actually seen this film before we decided to review it anyway, but even given that, I had like a double take on my second watch where I was like, because I was like, oh yeah, and then obviously we see Mel Gibson, realize it's not there. I was like, wait, that didn't happen, and it was really surprising because I kind of thought it was going to be there, even though I'd seen the film twice before then. So yeah, it's really conspicuous in its absence.
Yeah, it is weird, but anyway, so his wife dies, and this is the issue with the William Wallace character. He starts off by saying he doesn't want to fight. He says that to his wife's dad, which is contrary to his experience as a kid, but okay, maybe he's gotten over it. It was a long time ago. He has a new perspective. But then he kills all the English soldiers because they killed his wife. I get it. But then, that makes him want to start a rebellion and free Scotland. That's a big jump. I mean, you could say, well, it's a logical conclusion, given his past, and it's the only thing he can do at this point is fight because, he killed a bunch of English soldiers, he's going to die, so, why not lead a rebellion? And of course, he may also come to the conclusion that, well, I can't really live freely under here anymore, none of us can with this occupation. But there is no conversation between him and another character. It's just kind of like, well, this is what has got to happen now, I guess, since he's William Wallace and this is what he does. There's no talk about, from one of the older men, who hangs around with him about this being inevitable, that William Wallace was born for this was always going to happen. There isn't any character development. Like, later on in the movie, you consider at the start, like I said, he goes from saying, no, I don't want to fight, I just want to own a farm, want to have a wife, that's all I want to do. He talks about Scottish people being slaves, and that is just so different to him saying that he just wants a nice, normal life. Like, it's a complete change, and you do not see that character development at all. That was a major issue for me. Obviously the movie's got a lot of issues, but that was a big one. At least get that right. You can make up stuff if you want Mel Gibson, but come on, that's the central fucking point of the movie. William Wallace wants to free Scotland, and he just flipped a switch. All of a sudden, he's this freedom fighter. What do you think?
No, yeah, basically, and that's the thing. It's weird because they do set it up at the beginning, like you say, of like they kind of have the moment where you can kind of see how it would lead to his motivation, which is obviously his dad dies fighting Scots, but then you can also see how it would lead to him being kind of off in the wilderness and being the kind of person who's like, I'm not going to fight this battle anymore. Which, again, I have to say would work better with him kind of being an old person, like Unforgiven style, Clint Eastwood, but whatever. Basically, having him be somebody who he doesn't want to take a stand, he doesn't want to fight, and then, of course, the film would be about him learning to do that and learning to take a stand, but like you say, it pretty much happens just really abruptly, and I kind of pretty much agree with you that that's what the film should be about. It should be about William Wallace learning to become a freedom fighter, and it isn't about that at all. Like he like you say, the film pretty much forces him to, and then that's it. He's William Wallace, freedom fighter.
Yeah, this is him now. There's no sort of transition either. And there's a lot of talk, by the way, this is kind of an aside, there's a lot of talk in the movie about the legend of William Wallace. But yeah, he doesn't, I mean, it would be nice if you had some scenes where he, saves people and they say, oh, who are you? Oh, I'm William Wallace. And, but it just seems like, oh, this is who he is. This is what the movie wants to portray him as, so that is what he is. And obviously the most egregious example of that is, like I said, his motivation. He's now this freedom fighter. So that's that stage of the movie. He becomes a guy who's going to save Scotland and release the Scottish people from their slavery, which again is so different to what his attitude was before. But yeah, then we get to a stage in the movie where you are kind of thrust into different situations, and it's kind of similar to the start where I said I'm a bit confused. It is hard to know each character's motivation and the context of each battle without reading up on Wikipedia. I mean, take the Battle of Stirling, for instance. I was like, well, who's battling the English? It's the Scottish nobles? Well, why? I know why Mel Gibson would do that, why he would be battling the English, but why are these Scottish nobles doing it? Like, why? I mean, they just want to do it for titles and so on, but it'd be good to have that set up. Anyway, that's the battle where he says, they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. That line is said. So it's a good battle scene overall, which we'll get onto later, but I would just like a bit of more of a setup. And again, at the end, it just skips forward a year randomly, and then at the end of the movie, skips forward 7 years after William Wallace dies. It skips forward another, I think, 7 years to the Battle of what is it called? I can't get it.
Bannockburn?
Bannockburn, that's it. Bannockburn, yeah, it just skips forward another few years. So, yeah, I just thought this was a common problem with the movie. And again, I referenced at the start, it just keeps on going to places, skipping around, and I just don't know the context. And I love that context, Michael. I love that juicy context. And I'm just not getting it. What do you think?
No, yeah. Yeah, basically, I mean, that's the thing. Like, yeah, with the battles, it does kind of happen. And I think that's kind of what I mean when I describe this film as almost just like, it feels like there's somebody with swords swinging around and that's happening, but there's nothing much really happening beyond that. And it's kind of, I think part of that issue is because you do have, these people they're like, all right, let's get together for a fight. There's no understanding of the significance of this fight and, you know, what it means. There's no like, we've got to do this to achieve this objective. And once we do that, that will, you know, mean that this thing will happen or have this implication. It is kind of just like, yeah, it's like, well, they started a war. Guess we're going to have a fight now. Which
the movie could have used a narrator more. They used it a bit at the start and at the end, but it could have really used it throughout the movie. That would have definitely helped. And I don't know why they didn't do it. Just have Robert the Bruce narrate it, you know, throughout the whole movie. That would have made sense. So yeah, whatever. Go on.
No, yeah. I mean, I was going to say, I was just going to say the fact that it's like they just have to get together to battles is made especially egregious by the fact that I feel like every single time they have a battle, it happens to be on a perfectly clear field, which, you know, is almost like just a complete plain without any obstacles of any sort, and it's kind of just like as if they're like, okay, here it is. Well, okay, we've got to have a battle to the field, the designated field for having a battle, and obviously in reality,
you've been over this. Yes.
But it's just funny to me because it kind of shows how, or it, you know, makes it feel like these people are just like, yep, time to have a battle.
Yes.
What are we gonna, you know? Yep, and that's boring.
That's what it feels like, and I don't really like that. I need to understand why characters are doing certain things. Like I said, the Scottish nobles, why are they battling the English here? You know, if there was some narration, or you know, William Wallace was speaking to one of his men, and they said, you know, the Scottish nobles are going after the English because of this and that. Do you want to join them? And William Wallace is like, aye, let's join them. Just that, and then it makes a bit more sense. And in a 3-hour movie, it's kind of really, really bad not to have that context there. Anyway, after that though, I did enjoy, because I understood stuff more, and I read a bit on Wikipedia as well. I did enjoy the politics after that. There's this nice period of the movie, like probably about 2 hours in, around that time, where, you know, the Scottish nobles are quarrelling over who should be king, the tactical battles between the King of England, Edward Longshanks, and William Wallace as well, Robert the Bruce betraying him, and his struggle of, you know, whether to be a full-on patriot or, you know, be more cautious and compromising and try and seek more power the smart way, I guess. And obviously the king as well, using the princess against the Scots, as she is French. You know, that was his plan as well. I was like, oh, this is nice. You know, I like all this because I understand what's going on and it's interesting. So yeah, that was a nice bit of the movie. Probably the bit of the movie I enjoyed the most. What do you think?
No, yeah, I kind of agree. I think and I will say actually one thing I liked about this film is that I think it's interesting that William Wallace isn't really the main guy in this battle, and I think that's kind of all in this war, and I think it's interesting because obviously Robert the Bruce is kind of it's almost like I like the fact that William Wallace is almost a smaller part of a larger story, where obviously he's kind of the initial person who kind of really ramps this battle up, and he inspires Robert the Bruce to really become more committed to being free of England's yoke, and obviously that happens in reality, and I think that kind of aspect is interesting of it's not so, you know, great manny in terms of being like, oh, it's got to be about the most important person in the world. It's sort of like, hey, it shows how a relatively minor person can have a big impact that ultimately can inspire greater people to do things. I thought that was a really interesting aspect. I think that's kind of attached to the politics of obviously how, you know, Robert the Bruce's actions are very much attached to the way the film plays out politically. And yeah, I did enjoy that. Yeah,
no, it was good. And then obviously what happens is William Wallace gets betrayed by one of the nobles looking to get some more power from the king or some more land or whatever, much to the chagrin of Robert the Bruce, his father set him up. Again, I like that. It's nice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you know, the Scottish nobles out for themselves, you know, like the nobility would naturally be. And, you know, his father trying to use William Wallace, you know, use him as a sacrifice to get Robert the Bruce to be King of Scotland. It all works quite well. It's interesting. So then we get to the end of the movie, Michael, where Mel Gibson, he got accused after this movie of being overindulgent, being a bit, narcissistic, perhaps, making it all about himself in this movie. And boy, was that criticism accurate. That's what I'd say. I mean, the Jesus imagery is just so over the top. Like, I thought, there's this scene where he's walking towards the king of, not the king of England, whoever's ruling this Scottish village, after his wife dies, and he's got his hands up, like surrendering. And I thought, well, is there a Jesus imagery going on there? Or am I just associating that because of his previous movie, or the movies I have seen, Passion of the Christ? It's like, perhaps not, he's just holding his hands up. It's not necessarily a Jesus pose. But then you get to the end of the movie, and literally the fucking thing he's getting tortured on is a cross. It is so obvious. And we saw the warning signs, I guess, in this movie for Passion of the Christ, and in What Women Want as well, when he rips hair off his leg. He likes pain in his movies. Yeah, he likes sacrificing for, or he likes portraying sacrifice, I guess. And in this movie, very much the case at the end. I think it going over the top at the end is a fair criticism. What do you think?
No, basically. I mean, obviously, I think it is kind of interesting. I think one of the things about it I find kind of funny in a way is obviously being hand-drawn and quartered. One of the significant things about it is that it's supposed to not be a very dignified way to die. It's kind of dishonest for the film to present it as they do, because they kind of present it as it's kind of weird, because I almost feel like if you're going to do that, you have to kind of commit to it and really make you feel the full force of it, because as they do it, it's kind of just like it's there to facilitate showing how noble he is and how brave he is, and even in the face of all this punishment, he doesn't cool out and ask for mercy or anything like that. And it's all just a bit, much. And I think they really didn't have to do it. I mean, it is interesting, because obviously that torture scene, or kind of the film runs for a decent while after he gets caught. And that's kind of in keeping with, like I say, Passion of the Christ, where the entire film happens after Jesus gets caught. So I agree with you that the warning signs are there, and it is decently obnoxious, let's say.
Yes, for sure. And that's the end of the movie. He gets hung, drawn, and quartered, and shouts "freedom" as the king is dying, and the king can apparently hear him, which is funny, because I was like, when I was watching this, I was like, "There's no way this is accurate," and of course it wasn't. But before we get into the historical inaccuracy, let's talk about the battle scenes. So obviously you have critiqued them. I don't know if you can do that a bit more, but overall,
no, not too much.
Yeah, I have to say I found them decent. Like I said, and like you've said, probably not the most historically accurate, but considering this was in the mid 1990s, I think they did a good job all round. Like, there was a lot of slow motion that I noticed that was a bit annoying, but I think the battle scenes are one of the movie's strong points, and that is what I think a lot of people note who enjoy this movie. It's like, oh yeah, the battle scenes, they're really good. And you don't see these kind of scenes anymore in movies. I mean, you don't see like historical epics, really.
No, you don't really, no.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching like Troy when I was younger. Remember that? That was another one. That. Yeah, and these big Hollywood movies that, historical epic, they're not made anymore. And this is one of the obviously most famous ones, and you can look at these battle scenes of like real people and all the costumes, and like, wow, they put a lot of effort into this. And it's kind of, I don't know if nostalgic's the right word, but it is kind of sad, I guess, that this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. What do you think?
No, I mean, I'm not going to criticise the battle scenes, although I might have a few choice words when we get to the historical inaccuracy, which is a different thing. But obviously I've said what needs to be said about the way that battles are inaccurately portrayed. But I will say, I think, I guess that's the thing overall, like in terms of the quality of it. I think there's a certain grittiness you get from the fact that obviously it is made with, real horses and real people in real armour and things like that you often don't get in battle scenes. I mean, it's kind of difficult because it's really hard to think about a major film recently that had big, impressive battles. I mean, the only thing I can think of that's done that recently would be Game of Thrones, and even then, the battles, by the nature of the show being a TV show, they haven't been too well, they often will only have like a little bit of the show dedicated to a whole battle, although sometimes they have done whole battles dedicated to TV shows, and those are really good. Like the Battle of the Blackwater, the finale to season 2, is really good and a really great battle scene. Obviously season 2 is before the show got really bad, but apart from that, and even then that would have been like 2012, yeah, you really don't see, I agree with you, you don't really see those kind of big massive spectacles. I mean, obviously there was Kingdom of Heaven by Ridley Scott and things like that, but and I think, yeah, it's kind of is like the grittiness, I think, is just so nice about it, like that you really do feel like you're kind of on the battlefield, and the intensity is kind of there, whereas I do feel like a lot of the time in these films it's a lot more just like removed, and it's kind of because obviously, and part of that's because there's the CGI, so you often have like a camera shot that's like craning over, and there's loads of they don't have to hire anything like as many extras, but it doesn't feel as personal, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, they're not my favourite thing in the world, but I can appreciate it for what it is, and like I said, I think the effort that goes into it is really impressive. And so, yeah, that's a strong point of the movie for sure, the battle scenes. Even if they're not the most historically accurate. And that is what we're going to move on to now, Michael. We've been referencing it throughout the movie because, I mean, we can't ignore it, obviously. And all the time when I was watching it before reading up on the history of this period, I was thinking in the back of my head, is this accurate? And on some points in the movie, I was like, yeah, this is definitely not accurate. This has to be completely made up. And sure enough, that is the case. So let's just give a bit of background first. So Randall Wallace, who wrote the screenplay, has acknowledged Blind Harry's 15th century epic poem, The Acts and Deeds of Sir William Wallace, as a major inspiration for the film. In defending his script, Randall Wallace has said, "Is Blind Harry true? I don't know. I know it spoke to my heart, and that's what matters to me, that it spoke to my heart." Well, that's that then, I guess.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Blind Harry's poem is not regarded as historically accurate. So I guess that answers that question that Randall Wallace had. And although some incidents in the film that are not historically accurate are taken from Blind Harry, for example, the hanging of Scottish nobles at the start, there are large parts that are based neither on history nor Blind Harry, e.g. William Wallace's affair with Princess Isabella. So yeah, that's just a start. So I guess that is the excuse that people like Randall Wallace can make, and even Mel Gibson. They can be like, hey, this is based off this poem. So that was written a long time ago. So really, just have a go at the poem, not us. But yeah, like I said, it's not just the poem which is historically inaccurate. It's the other stuff that they put in. So let's go through it then. The first thing is that we have to talk about the overall context of the battle, the occupation and independence of Scotland.
Yeah.
So the film suggests that Scotland had been under English occupation for some time, at least during Wallace's childhood. And in the run-up to the Battle of Falkirk, Wallace says to the younger Bruce, "We'll have what none of us have ever had before, a country of our own." In fact, Scotland had been invaded by England only the year before Wallace's rebellion. Prior to the death of King Alexander III, it had been a fully separate kingdom. After Alexander III's death in 1286, remember Wallace was born in 1270, so he was 16 years old when Alexander III died. Sorry?
Sorry, I was just saying, yeah.
Yeah. Alexander III's granddaughter, Margaret Maid of Norway, succeeded to the throne of Scotland until her death in 1290 in Orkney. So at least 20 years of Scotland having an actual monarch on the throne. Yeah. And like we said, it was only in 1296 that the English invaded, 1 year prior to Wallace's rebellion in 1297. So, yeah, for 26 years of Wallace's life, Scotland had not been under occupation by the English. That's a pretty big mark against this movie.
Also, the other thing I wanted to bring up, I don't know if you've got this down, but basically well, first of all, I happen to know the Scottish War of Independence was not called the Scottish War of Independence until centuries after the actual war occurred. And while I don't know exactly what it's called at the time, it was basically a succession crisis war. Because, and I did know this already in the broad terms, basically the guy you mentioned, Alexander, he died, and then the woman, Margaret, I think was her name, you mentioned, she also died quite young. And then there was a big succession crisis where basically, it doesn't really matter too much, but Edward put this guy on the throne, and then the guy on the throne didn't do what Edward liked, and Edward was like, well, this is bullshit, I put this guy on the throne, he's not even doing what I wanted to do. And that was pretty much how the war started, and I just think that's like very different from the way it's presented in the film, where it's kind of like a oppression of the Scottish people by the English people, and it's not really like that. It's basically, there was an open kind of throne in Scotland where no one was put on it, so Edward was like, well, I'll support this guy's claim So it was literally Edward was supporting a Scottish king because he wanted influence in Scotland, which is obviously not a occupation. And then obviously, like you say, it was only immediately prior to the Wallace Rebellion that Edward was like, fuck this, we're going to actually invade. But it literally wasn't how it's presented, which is that they were overthrowing British rule. They'd not been subject to British rule, basically. They'd been subject to one king who was kind of supported by the English, and that was it. So I just found that really funny.
No, yeah, that completely changes the whole context of the movie, that explanation. So now we need to get onto the portrayal of William Wallace. So,
the man, the legend.
Yes, because William Wallace is one of Scotland's most important national heroes, and because he lived in the past, much that is believed about him is probably the stuff of legend, but there is a factual strand that historians agree to. That is from Matt Ewart. So, Wallace was born into the gentry of Scotland. His father lived until he was 18, not until he was like 10. His mother until his 24th year, and his mother isn't even in this movie. He killed the Sheriff of Lanark when he was 27, apparently after the murder of his wife. So that bit's true, I guess. He led a group of commoners against the English in a very successful battle at Stirling in 1297, temporarily receiving appointment as Guardian. Wallace's reputation as a military leader was ruined in the same year of 1297, leading to his resignation as Guardian. He spent several years of exile in France, pretty big part of his life, which just isn't in this movie, before being captured by the English at Glasgow, this resulting in his trial for treason and his cruel execution. So yeah, he was the youngest son of a Scottish gentry, well educated, not very peasant-like, I guess, and any hint of his descent from the lowland gentry is erased, and he's presented as an economically and politically marginalised Highlander and farmer, as one with a common peasant and with a strong spiritual connection to the land which he is destined to liberate. And that is from Krista Kennitz, who has, basically saying that he's portrayed as, like another, just a regular person in Scotland, a common man, when that is clearly not the case. And it's clearly not the case because he goes to fucking Europe to speak to learn about speaking Latin and French.
Yeah, I found that was a weird tension where it's like he has, and I think it's kind of like the way they present it is sort of like he was a peasant basically who learned of his own kind of volition, I guess, that to be a gentleman, and that was considered in some way to his credit, but obviously in reality he was always like that, so it's just inaccurate.
Yeah, he was always this guy, and he was not a commoner. And Colin MacArthur writes that Braveheart constructs Wallace as a kind of modern nationalist guerrilla. And this is what we're going to talk about, or what you were keen to talk about next, Michael. And basically, he was this leader, or this movie portrays him as a leader in a period half a millennium before the appearance of nationalism on the historical stage as a concept under which disparate classes and interests might be mobilized within a nation state. So, writing about Braveheart's omissions of verified historical facts, MacArthur notes that Wallace made overtures to Edward I seeking less severe treatment after his defeat at Falkirk, as well as the well-documented fact of Wallace having resorted to conscription and his willingness to hang those who refused to serve. Kennett posts that depicting such a lack of class solidarity as the conscriptions and related hangings would contaminate the movie's image of Wallace as the morally irreproachable primus inter pares. So that's first among many, I believe.
Yes, we know that from our citizenship degree, don't we? Because the Prime Minister is primus inter pares.
Yes, we do know that. Among his peasant fighters. So yes, basically what Colin MacArthur is talking about to sum up, William Wallace was hanging people who refused to fight with him, and so he's saying he's doing this for the common man, for the nation of Scotland. Firstly, the nation state wasn't really a thing, which I actually did know. It first became apparent under Napoleon, I believe, after the French Revolution. So that was when, like
the idea of being French came about, and obviously, unsurprisingly, then it wasn't in 1870. You got the Germany and Italy becoming united things, and obviously they just didn't think of themselves as nations prior to that.
Well, you can see here, the concept under which classes and interests might be mobilized within a nation state. It just it wasn't a concept like people from different walks of life, different status, all banding together around a flag. It just wasn't it wasn't real. So him doing this throughout the movie, talking about Scotland and freeing the people of Scotland, and getting all saying to the nobles, you got to look after the people of Scotland. It's just that was never happening. It was just a totally different mindset to what we have today in terms of talking about a country.
Yeah, the other thing is, you mentioned the way he's presented as morally irreproachable, and morally irreproachable. That's the word. one of the examples of that I found interesting was that he, when he escapes from the battle at the, during the with the Battle of Falkirk, that's the one where he gets betrayed,
that is
isn't it?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, the Battle of Falkirk.
He like they make him, they have to have him escape, but they have to have him escape in a way where it's like completely, there's nothing remotely cowardly about what he did, because he runs off to chase the king, and then he ends up getting knocked out, and they have to carry him away because obviously they've set William Wallace up such that he can't run away and flee, because he's supposed, that's not how they've let him be as a character. And I found that really I found like that moment stuck out to me. I was just like they're really trying. And obviously we know in reality that kings or nobles who led armies were very often quite keen to run away to fight another day. And
William Wallace
would have been no
any
exception.
different,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And obviously, like say, he ran away to France. Like literally, he almost certainly was like, well, shit, I might lose this war. I'm going to run away to France and see if I can, get some help from the French, because they hate the English, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Obviously, he shows up and then gets captured and betrayed, but they can't have that. So they have to have him. And like you say, the fact that he ran away to France, completely absent, presumably because that would be, he can't run away. He's got to stay in Scotland because he's so heroic and noble.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, exactly. And, you were going to talk about how this framing of William Wallace as, a commoner who's fighting for the Scottish people kind of speaks to American audiences, I believe.
Yes, yeah. I'll talk, yeah. So basically, I think, like I mentioned before, how this was called the Scottish War of Independence, but it wasn't called the Scottish War of Independence, like I said, ambiguously, until centuries afterwards. And the actual reality is that it wasn't called the Scottish War of Independence until after the American War of Independence. So that's a fact right there. I think that fact is indicative of how this film is set up, which I feel like this film uses the idea of a war of independence against the English to appeal to their own to the American sense of that. And for example, you can see it in where he says, we'll have something we've never had before, a country of our own, which you obviously already mentioned. And that would resonate with an American audience, because Americans at the time of their War of Independence from the English had never had a country of their own before. So for them, that idea makes sense. And this is kind of a minor thing. It's not like the biggest thing, but I definitely feel like this film was made with that thought in mind. American audiences would understand that they had a war of independence against the English, which led to the foundation of their nation. And that was a good rhyme. And I think this film wants to basically present Scotland as a parallel to that, with obviously William Wallace as kind of a parallel to George Washington. And obviously you can talk about how that George Washington, the fact that he was in the employ of the British Army as a wealthy general, and the fact that he, literally inherited estates, plantations, which I think a certain type of people used to work on plantations back in the day. All of that's ignored from Washington's history. And I wouldn't say Washington is necessarily portrayed as like a peasant fighter or anything like that, but he's certainly portrayed as a lot less landed than he actually was in real life. In fact, Washington was not so distantly a descendant of English royalty, as a fact I learned recently. But basically what I'm saying is I think that's kind of the way they present Scotland is also the way I think a lot of Americans like to see themselves in their own War of Independence. I feel this film is way more about America and their relationship with England and independence from England than it is about Scotland.
Yeah, I guess it's just, and not necessarily about America, it's just how an American audience would see this kind of war.
Yeah.
They would see this war as, well, the Scottish are being oppressed by the English, and so you have this groundswell of Scottish people rising up against them, when of course it was really nothing like that, and there is no concept of like Scottish unity, and that is something that I think not just American audiences, a bunch of audiences today don't really realise. That's, like you said, when was Italy and Germany formed? Like in the 19th century, Napoleon really galvanised France for using a nation state as a way to dominate the rest of Europe, like no one had seen before. That is something that did start back in the 19th century, and it was not the case in the 13th century. So yeah, like you said, the Scottish...
Because the 19th century is different from the 13th century. Do you see how that works?
Yes, that is correct. And yes, the whole thing about the Scottish War of Independence, like William Wallace, maybe he wanted, the English to leave, but I'm sure based on the fact that, of his background and the fact that he would have no interest in helping like the peasant class, he would be fine with, being a very powerful noble, with the English still somewhat controlling Scotland. He would not be all for freedom, like Mel Gibson states in this movie. What do you think?
No, yeah, basically, I definitely agree with you that he wouldn't be like that in real life, and he would. I mean, again, like I say, it's kind of like you could do this for, and I mentioned the idea of this being a war of succession because I think that's a relevant context. Of course, we famously, I don't know why I said famously, we covered The Favourite, which was also set during the War of Spanish Succession. And I imagine the idea, because obviously the War of Spanish Succession, what was it? Well, it was France supported one monarch to take over Spain, England supported another monarch to take over Spain, and this kind of thing happened all the time. Like, there'd be a vacancy where it wasn't clear who was going to be next king, and different powers would support different people. And you can almost imagine like a stupid, like if Mel Gibson ever got his hands on the Spanish War of Succession, he'd have some Spanish guy there being like, we need to fight for our freedom from the English. And I'd be like, we need our independence from the English. They have been attacking us or they have been marrying all of our daughters and all that kind of stuff. And you just be like, obviously in reality, it's just a bunch of rich noblemen who are disagreeing over who's going to own what piece of land. And that's,
Yeah. So that's what it's powerful people not happy that they've got not as much power as they'd like, which is history, I guess. But that's portrayal of William Wallace. Fair to say, it really flattered him. And to be honest, again, like we can talk about, well, he was actually a bad guy, but this guy that Mel Gibson is in this movie, that just did not exist. Like the concepts that he's fighting for did not exist. So it's kind of harsh to say, well, William Wallace, he was a bad guy because it's like, hey, he was just another person, fighting for power. That's just.
It's almost like, I guess that's the thing. It's kind of a story where it almost shouldn't have even been expressed in moralistic terms. Like, and it's kind of like there was a moment. It was a weird moment where there's like a town being burned out. It's immediately after William Wallace says like, we're going to start this rebellion, blah 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 blah, and then it cuts to a town being burnt down and destroyed. And initially, my first thought when I saw it was, oh, of course, this is the William Wallace's rebellion. He is attacking towns. He's launching a basically, war of kind of terror, which is what you would typically do if you started a rebellion. You would start, causing a ruckus, trying to draw the people out, and, burning shit down. I was like, well done there. They're actually portraying William Wallace as what he would probably have actually been doing, which is attacking people, burning things. And I wasn't even going to judge. Like, I wouldn't be like, oh, that's evil, because I'm like, well, it's a war. Obviously he's going to do that. But they didn't even do that. I think that's kind of the same thing I was thinking, like, throughout the whole film, just that on and that was like an example of where I just thought, they didn't even have to present it in moral terms. They could have just shown it as it actually would have been, which would have been, they would have attacked loads of people. But again, they had to kind of moralize the film, and the consequence of that is they couldn't present the film honestly, because, there isn't really these strict moral dimensions to these things.
Mm-hmm, yeah, so I guess, we've just taken down the whole, like, concept of...
Yeah, we dunked on it.
Yeah, of William Wallace fighting for freedom of the Scottish people, like, the Scottish peasants, oh, we're under English rule, oh, now we're under Scottish rule. There's no difference to them, really, at all. Their lives don't really change. It's just the noblemen who change. That's why, they want to fight to get more power. But anyway, let's move on to the portrayal of Isabella of France. So this is, again, one of the most funny things about this movie. Isabella of France is shown having an affair with Wallace after the Battle of Falkirk. She later tells Edward I she is pregnant, implying that her son, Edward III, was a product of the affair with Wallace. In reality, Isabella was around 3 years old and living in France at the time of the Battle of Falkirk.
Yes, I have heard that.
Unless William Wallace is a nonce, this is not accurate. She was not married to Edward II until he was already king, and Edward III was born 7 years after Wallace died. So again, unless it's a world record-breaking pregnancy, it's unlikely that William Wallace father.
I also have a fun fact about Edward III. I say a fun fact. I found it very funny because obviously she has this moment where she talks to Edward I, and she's like, "The child in my belly is not actually born of Edward II. It's really born of William Wallace." So first of all, that you have to point out that would be a huge thing if it were actually true. Like, if you think about it, because the idea that a king was illegitimate is the foundation for. Obviously nowadays it doesn't matter. No one's going to be like, oh, you don't get Jacobites nowadays running around going, oh, the royal line is illegitimate. Restore the House of Stuart or whatever. But that idea obviously is huge to suggest retrospectively, oh yeah, the entire line of succession was a sham. I mean, almost certainly it was, because let's be honest, people be having sex with each other. But the one thing I find particularly funny about the line is, of course, this person would then go on to be Edward III. Edward the First, Edward II, Edward III. They like to just do things in these, everyone has the same name. And Edward III would go on to fight in the Second Scottish War of Independence against Scotland. So it's very funny to me that they kind of present this like victorious moment of like, she's like, hey, guess what, you stupid Edward I, who's trying to fight the First War of Scottish Independence, or fight against the Scottish in the First War of Scottish Independence. The child in my belly, Edward III, is not going to be of your line. And it's like Edward III shows up and it's like, so what should we do, Edward III? And he's like, I don't know, guess we should attack the Scottish. It's like, it's just funny to me. But that's like, and obviously, the film never even goes into that at all, but it's like just something I was thinking about, which found funny.
Her menacing suggestion to a dying Longshanks that she would overthrow and destroy Edward II is based in fact. However, it was in 1326, over 20 years after Wallace's death, that Isabella, her son, and her lover, Roger Mortimer, would invade England to dispose and later murder Edward II. So, yes, like, Isabella got involved in, hating Edward II, completely independent of William Wallace. They never met, obviously. They never were together. They never, were in any way connected. So, yeah, this is just completely bullshit. And that's what I was thinking at the time. I was like, yeah, this has got to be completely false. No way this is true. But anyway, portrayal of Robert the Bruce now, Michael, onto that. And just a quick on this, because I thought this was quite funny as well. In particular, while the film name Braveheart refers to protagonist William Wallace, the nickname Braveheart has been posthumously attributed to Robert the Bruce. So that's interesting. It's not even about William Wallace, whose heart was brought to a crusade in Spain by Sir James Douglas and thrown into a battle against the Moors. So there you go. That's apparently what happened to him. So he is referred to as Braveheart, not William Wallace. If I'm seeing that fact, I'm like, maybe we need to change the title of this movie, considering Robert the Bruce is a major character in this, and the term Braveheart is actually about him and not William Wallace. But yeah, apparently Mel Gibson was like, fuck it, we can call it Braveheart.
That's a big twist. I did not know that. So that's a really interesting one. So yeah, it was. Yeah, he's not even considered. William Wallace wasn't even the Braveheart. I mean, maybe you could say it's like a really clever twist where it's like, I can't think of an example of a film like this, but where it's kind of like, I guess the example I'm thinking of is like The Lord of the Rings, where the Lord of the Rings in The Lord of the Rings is literally the ring itself, because it's the ring to rule over all other rings. Yeah. And obviously the ring isn't the main character. So maybe it's kind of a similar thing where, it's like, Braveheart, it actually refers to to Robert the Bruce, even though you think it's referring to the main character. It's actually very clever. See, it's 4D chess.
Yes, absolutely. So
you seem skeptical. You don't seem to believe that Mel Gibson is in fact a genius.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't think that really. I'm not going to lie.
There's only two things that make me doubt that Mel Gibson is a genius: the things he does and says. Yes.
Okay, we'll get on to him in a bit, but anyway. Well, I guess now, because we are talking about the portrayal of Edward Longshanks and Prince Edward. The actual Edward I, that's Edward Longshanks, was ruthless and temperamental, but the film exaggerates his negative aspects. So he enjoyed harp music, apparently, and was a loving husband to his wife, which we never see, and apparently he gave to charity as well. So when the film...
just like Edward Colston. We love our Edwards, always given to charity.
The film scene where he scoffs cynically at Isabella for giving gold to the poor after Wallace refuses it as a bribe.
Yeah, that feels like a Disney villain moment.
Yeah, would have been unlikely. Also, Edward died on campaign 2 years after Wallace's execution, not in bed at his home. And I was thinking that as well. It's like, no way he's dying just as William Wallace is dying. And yeah, sure enough, it was 2 years later. So yeah, William Wallace was probably not on his mind when he died. So let's now talk about the depiction of Edward II as an effeminate homosexual, which drew accusations of homophobia against Mel Gibson. So,
yes.
This is Mel Gibson, I think. He's saying, we cut out a scene, unfortunately, where you really got to know that character and understand his plight and pain, but it just stopped the film in the first act so much that you thought, when's this story going to start? So that was Mel Gibson saying, we did give him more character than just a fucking homosexual gay boy. But anyway, Gibson further defended his depiction of Prince Edward as a weak and ineffectual leader, saying, I'm just trying to respond to history. You can cite other examples. Alexander the Great, for instance, who conquered the entire world, was also a homosexual. But this story isn't about Alexander the Great, it's about Edward II.
Hold a minute, that makes no sense though, because isn't the whole point is Alexander the Great was a homosexual, or I don't think you can really use terms like homosexual to refer to times back past, but let's say the Greeks like doing a bit of bumming. But the whole point is that Alexander the Great was also a pretty, literally a great man. The whole issue here is that this guy is presented as like basically a weak, ineffectual ruler, and the whole substance of that seems to be entirely that he's gay. So
Yeah, he's
that doesn't
not a
even
real
make
man.
sense.
Yeah.
That's like if you made like a film where just like all the bad people were black, and someone was like, "Why'd you make all the bad people black?" I'm like, well, actually, historically, lots of people were black. Martin Luther King was black. And it's like, yeah, the point wasn't that they're black. The point is the way that you use the fact they're black to code them in the film. So yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the first scene you see of him, and it's just a hilarious scene in the wedding. He's looking back at this guy who's really his lover, and the guy's looking. I think he's called Piers Graveston. That's the name of Edward, the second's lover in this movie.
Yeah. And sorry, can I just clarify? Is he the one who gets thrown out the window?
Yes, he is. Yes.
Okay,
yes,
I couldn't tell because they all look the same to me. These white boys.
Yeah, and this guy just staring back at him so seductively, and then the king just looking absolutely shocked, like, what? What is going on here? Oh god, it's so ham-fisted. It's like, my son is gay? What? And I found out at his wedding? Oh my, how embarrassing for me. Like, he just kisses his wife, like, meekly on the cheek. Like, yeah, okay, we get it. He's gay. I mean, you could have made that a bit more subtle. But here's the thing, like, his explanation, you could say, well, it's a bit, clumsy, Mel Gibson. But then you consider his other movies and his religious nature, and you have to say, definitely homophobic. Like, again, we're looking at a similar thing in terms of Passion of the Christ, where... is it anti-Semitic?
Remember, I was thinking about, the other thing I was thinking about in Passion of the Christ is, remember Herod in Passion of the Christ? Do you remember how he's portrayed? He's literally just the gayest.
Yeah.
he's literally just like coquettish. He's
yes.
just like, yes, what are you doing?
Yeah, so again, like,
Terrible.
anti-Semitism in Passion of the Christ is like, is it there? Well, Mel Gibson says no, but then you hear his quote 2 years later, and it's like, oh yeah, definitely anti-Semitic.
Yeah. There's only 2 things that make me think Mel Gibson might be anti-Semitic. The things he says and does.
Absolutely, yes. And homophobic, I guess, based on this movie as well. So in response to Longchamp's murder of the prince's male lover, Philip... Oh, is he called Philip? I thought he was Piers Gaveston or whatever. That's what I read in some research I did. But anyway, Mel Gibson replied, "The fact that King Edward throws this character out of a window has nothing to do with him being gay." I love that clarification.
I like that. That's such a funny sentence.
Just cutting to... No, he throws... Yeah. It doesn't matter that he's gay. He throws him out the window. No. He says he's terrible to his son, to everybody. Gibson asserted that the reason Longshanks kills his son's lover is because the king is a psychopath. Gibson expressed bewilderment that some filmgoers would laugh at this murder. And yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, he just throws...
It is quite funny, yeah.
It is.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's like a really funny... to be honest, people being thrown out the window in general is quite funny.
Especially when the king's like, 60, and this guy's like 25. Like, it's a bit pathetic.
Well, he is pretty gay. Quite weak.
He is gay.
You've got to remember that.
Yes, he's not a real man, so maybe that makes sense. But yeah, so overall, yeah. And by the way, I saw... Because I researched this guy, Piers Gaveston, a bit, and it was unknown whether he was a lover with Edward II, or they were just really close friends, or brothers in arms was the phrase I heard used.
Yeah.
So it's not really known. So Mel Gibson decided to portray him as this, and he already knew he was a bad or ineffectual ruler. So it does seem like a specific choice to make him be gay, to explain why he's such a shit ruler. Yeah, I bet that went hand in hand in Mel Gibson's head. Like, he may be gay and he was a bad ruler. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Also, I mean, I mentioned before, I don't think it's entirely logical to take the ideas of like being gay and apply them specifically, like constructs, modern constructs of sexuality and point to the past. And like one thing is that there are loads of people who are like provably gay in the past who had a wife and kids, and significantly the point there is kids. And the point being that the film acts as if like, well, because he was gay, so let's just assume he was gay. It's like, because he was gay, he obviously couldn't possibly have had sex with a woman and given birth to a child, ignoring the fact that like there are innumerable examples throughout history of people who were, like I say, rulers who we pretty much know are gay, and we also know that they, had kids because, well, obviously they would. It's kind of like one of those things where it's not like being gay doesn't mean you like physically can't have sex with a woman. The same way, I mean, if prison shows anything, it's that being straight doesn't mean you can't have sex with a guy. So sexuality is complicated, and basically the idea of it's like, well, he's gay, so obviously he just wouldn't possibly be able to consummate his marriage, even though he's literally a king, and the only thing he needs to do is produce an heir. He definitely would have boinked his wife either way.
Yeah, no,
so,
absolutely. So let's get on now to Wallace's military campaign.
Sorry, I wanted to mention one other thing, actually, because I don't think you mentioned this, but I did look up the whole prima nocta thing, which is the idea
that isn't true. Obviously, I was going to mention that like at the end, like a little things which. And that isn't.
Because I was wondering if we were going to bring it up under the old Eddie, but yeah.
Yes. So Wallace did win an important victory at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, but the version
where was the bridge, Luke?
Yeah, in Braveheart is inaccurate. It was filmed without a bridge.
That's so funny. It's just so weird.
It's in the name. Later, Wallace did carry out a large-scale raid in the north of England, but he did not get as far south as York. That's the thing. I was watching this movie and I was thinking, there's so much history in New York, and I know quite a bit about it because
we went to university there. It's our alma mater.
Exactly, and literally on the street where we lived one year, there was a sign that commemorates the Battle of Fulford. Saying the Battle of Fulford happened here in this year. So history all around us in York. I don't remember William Wallace conquering York as a thing. Nor did he kill Longshank's nephew. However, this is in reference to York, this was not as wide of the mark as Blind Harry, who has Wallace making it as far as St. Albans, which is crazy. That's even more south than you. And only refraining from attacking London after the English Queen came out to meet him. Wow.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I was going to say I like that idea, and especially because you think about how far I live in Buckinghamshire, and for me going to St Albans is a trek. So the idea that someone would go all the way down from Scotland to St Albans and then be like, "Hey, it's another 5 miles to London, but we'll go back now because the Queen has told us to turn around."
Yeah, that's mental. I mean, Blind Harry. That is a very very apt name, I think.
Maybe Blind Harry couldn't read the road signs in St Albans, so he didn't know how close he was. It was just like they've been walking for ages. They're right on the foot of London. Like, we're marching for ages. Let's just turn around. Yep. Okay, Blind Harry. Yeah. I know Blind Harry is actually the person who wrote the stuff, but let's just pretend he was actually there.
Yes. Okay. There were no Irish troops at Falkirk either, although many of the English army were actually Welsh. So that's interesting. They added the Irish. No real need at all. The two long-headed saws used by Gibson were not used in the period as well. So anything else to say on William Wallace's military campaigns?
I guess. Oh, actually, I kind of should have maybe mentioned this under earlier because it's just it's a thing that I probably should mention this earlier because it's not really to do with historical inaccuracy, but it's one. The Scottish people didn't have any armour at all, which I found really funny, and obviously that plays more into the whole noble savage thing. I know it's kind of weird because that term's always used with Native Americans, but it kind of does feel like this film literally noble savages. That's how I'm gonna express it as a verb. The Scots, where it's like
the
Scots.
I don't think so, because it's not like the English don't use the land properly. That's not a trope.
No, I just kind of funny. Anyway, but the other thing is, and this is a common one that you see all the time, so again, I probably should have mentioned it when I mentioned the formations as a nitpick, but wearing mail without any padding is something which is really stupid because when you think about it, mail obviously is designed to stop something cutting you, but if someone hits you on the head with a sword and you're wearing mail and you're not wearing any padding, it's literally just going to be like somebody hitting you on the head with a massive iron bar. And obviously, historically, people would have worn padding under their mail in order to provide some kind of actual protection from the percussion of the sword. And it's just, you see it all the time, and maybe next time now you can see it and you can think, hold on a minute, if you just had some mail draped over your head and someone whacked you in the head with a sword, that's not going to offer any protection at all. So it's just a thing that happens all the time, and I find it really funny.
Okay, so just a couple more points on the historical inaccuracy, little points. Wallace... Uncle refers to Piper as playing outlawed tunes on outlawed pipes. Not only were bagpipes not outlawed at the time, they likely had not been introduced to Scotland. So that's another Scotland bagpipes. Let's throw it in. So some historians have obviously commented on this movie and the historical inaccuracies. Sharon Crosser has said that beginning with the wearing of the belted plaid by Wallace and his men is a real bad start. So in that period, no Scots wore belted plaids, let alone kilts of any kind. Moreover, when Highlanders finally did beginning wearing the belted plaid, it was not in the rather bizarre style depicted in the film. She compares the inaccuracy to a film about colonial America, showing colonial men wearing 20th century business suits, but with the jackets worn back to front instead of the right way around. So that was it's pretty inaccurate, I guess. In a previous essay about the film, she said, the events aren't accurate, the dates aren't accurate, the characters aren't accurate, the names aren't accurate, the clothes aren't accurate. In short, just nothing is accurate. Other historians have said it's a farcical representation of a wild and hairy Highlander painted with woad, which is about 1,000 years too late, running amok in a tartan kilt 500 years too early. In fact, Wallace was a lowlander, thus the mountains and glens of his home as depicted in the film are also inaccurate, And Irish historian Sean Duffy said the Battle of Stirling Bridge could have done with a bridge, which I think is
yes, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, it's just so bad. And in 2009, the film was second on a list of most historically inaccurate movies in the Times.
Oh, do you have any idea what was first? I'd kind of like to know that.
No, I shall look up. But just sum up, I guess, Michael, on the historical inaccuracy. Does it affect the movie? Because I think it does, certainly when it's this bad.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with you that that obviously Bohemian Rhapsody is worse because it's literally taking the story of an individual's life and like quite a recent story and like kind of just messing around with it all over the place. And I will say also, like, there are, I think, films which get the very fundamentals wrong in like a kind of when you're talking about the grand scheme of things. I don't think this film quite does that. I don't think this film quite, like, there are films I can think of which literally present things the exact opposite. A really good example would be, and there isn't an excuse for this, but a really good example would be 300 by Zack Snyder, where the Persians are presented as like the evil slave owners, while the Spartans are presented as like the brave fighters of liberty, even though the Spartans literally had a society made up of 90% slaves. So like that would be an obvious example of like a film where literally the fundamentals of what it's showing are wrong. In this case, I will generously say that it's not true that literally the fundamentals are wrong. Like, it is true that Scottish people have historically been subject to British people, or English people, I should say. It is, kind of true that they did fight for their independence, or, not necessarily independence, but fight for some kind of degree of freedom from the English yoke. And therefore, at least on the broadest level, it's okay. But yeah, when you fundamentally look at the story of the actual war itself and the characters, it's about as close as you can be to being completely historically inaccurate, without it completely going off the rails. And yeah, it's just, it's pretty much wrong in loads of different places. The only saving grace is it's not quite wrong about the absolute fundamental basics, but it is wrong about pretty much everything else it could possibly try to be wrong about. And also I should say that there is a reason. I think it's likely that the reason it was made this way is because of a lot of modern kind of biases, especially from an American perspective, and that kind of makes it more suspicious.
Okay. Well, U-571, which came out in 2000, which is depicting events in World War II, was the most historically inaccurate movie.
Oh, is that about a submarine?
Yes, it is, yes.
I've seen that film before. I actually really enjoyed it, but I didn't know anything about it being historically inaccurate, so that's quite funny.
Yes, so it depicts American rather than British naval officers capturing the Enigma machine.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, basically I've seen it. I do remember it being about Americans, and yeah, it's just a real classic film set on a submarine. It actually weirdly, conversely, made me want to go on a submarine, even though it's literally about like a submarine that sinks and everyone dies. So
okay. Well, yeah, that's pretty bad. But anyway, let's move on now to, I guess, I'll just sum up on the historical inaccuracy. Yeah. Like, when I'm watching a movie like this, I am, because it's not really that great overall. We've talked about the issue with Wallace's motivation doesn't have a character arc, so then you're focusing on learning about history. Oh, it's interesting that happened and that happened. When it's all basically untrue, then that just ruins it. So yeah, that's my thought on that. It definitely takes it a notch down quite a bit. And Mel Gibson's like, cinematically it's interesting, but for me, what's cinematically interesting is if things are being portrayed which are true when you're presenting them as non-fiction or as history. This is what happened. Oh, it didn't really happen? Well, how can I get invested then? That's how I see it. Anyway, so now we move on to what Scotland thought of this. So first I have to mention there was a William Wallace monument that was brought into Scotland in 1997, depicting Mel Gibson as William Wallace in Braveheart, which was placed in a car park of the Wallace Monument near Stirling, Scotland. The installation caused much controversy. One local resident stated it was wrong to desecrate the main memorial to Wallace with a lump of crap. So that's what they thought. And and then there was constant vandalising of the statue, and then it was eventually removed in 2008. They didn't. You think maybe the Scottish people didn't like, the depiction of William Wallace, but then you have to consider the tourist impact, and it's quite interesting. So basically, Braveheart really helped tourism in Scotland. Visitors went up 100,000 from the previous year, from 66k to 167k. At Stirling Castle, and basically half of them... Yeah,
talk about Stirling, more like pound sterling.
Exactly.
Castle.
Half of them had seen Braveheart, the visitors. It earned about 7 million to 15 million in tourist revenue in Scotland, and the report led to various national organisations encouraging international film productions to take place in Scotland. The film generated huge interest in Scotland and Scottish history, not only around the world, but also in Scotland itself. Very interesting how
Although given the obvious controversies around New Zealand and the Hobbit thing, and basically them giving up all the rights their actors had because of needing the money from New Line Cinema, basically it does seem like staking your entire country's fortune on its representation in a film franchise is going to lead to fucking your people over. So I guess Scotland had a narrow escape by the fact they have since not become famous for Braveheart land like New Zealand has with Lord of the Rings.
Yes. Well, I'm going to read two articles that came out 18 hours ago in the Scottish Herald, which is why I say,
Ooh.
yeah, like 18 hours ago. So I think
hot off the presses.
Exactly. Russell Ledbetter is writing the first one. So yeah, so basically it's all about the 25th anniversary of Scotland. Oh, sorry, the 25th anniversary of Braveheart. Yeah, Scotland started when Braveheart came out. That's when the Scottish people were like, wait a minute.
That's when they learned what the true accent was. They're like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be. I know this is ironic because I'm going to do a bad accent to make this a joke, but wait a minute, I'm supposed to be speaking like that.
Yeah. So this is, like you say, Michael, hot off the press by Russell Ledbetter. Why I love Braveheart. The film may be flawed, but it made Scots care about their history. And this is
sounds like a racist to me.
Yeah, this is going on from what we said before about, Scottish people took an interest in their history. I can't remember the location of the cinema, but I distinctly remember the audience reaction. In the awed darkness of the auditorium, several hundred filmgoers, having just watched the final scene in Braveheart, erupted in spontaneous applause. Some even stood up to cheer. I had never seen that sort of emotional reaction to a film before. In the words of Neil Asheron, nobody was prepared for the impact of Braveheart. In 1995, a wildly crude Hollywood distortion of the war story, which knocked Scotland over. So yes, I imagine this had a pretty big impact in Scotland. Some people have said, well, maybe it was the start of Scottish independence, that kind of talk, the revitalisation of it. Probably not, I'd have to say. Probably people took an interest in Scottish history, but judging by the results from the 2014 referendum, what people really disliked was Westminster. The Westminster Party is ignoring them. That was the main driver, not like this national pride that people had in Scotland. So anyway, we'll continue with the article. Yes, Braveheart is entertaining hokum, yet it takes all sorts of regrettable liberties with the historical record. And yes, those are Irish Uilleann pipes soundtracking a Scottish memorial service. Gibson having decided that traditional Scottish bagpipe sounded like a scolded cat, but for its numerous faults and for some of the whimsy in the first act does seem particularly arch. I don't think the film has lost much of the power that caught my imagination 25 years ago. So yeah, basically the article just goes on to say that it's been an incredibly important thing in Scotland. Historian Fiona Watson wrote that it made Scotland fashionable, or made Scottish history fashionable, and did make Scotland cool, and finally brought home to the watching world that the nation has a proud history of its own. And yeah, that's one point of view. And I like what the Scottish Herald did, because they published that point of view on Braveheart, and they published.
They are fair and balanced.
Yeah, they're very fair and balanced, because they published another article from Alison Rowat, who said, "Why I hate Braveheart: hanging, drawing, and quartering is too good for Mel Gibson. There has been many an artistic crime perpetuated against the Scottish accent down the years, but only Mel Gibson's attempt to roll his R's in Braveheart has had entire millions rolling their eyes." So yeah, she's not very happy with that. She's not very happy with the Battle of Stirling Bridge. She doesn't.
Did she see it and go, "Oh no"?
Yeah, exactly. Nee, that's not how he sounds. Or he'd sound. I can't believe it. Nee. There we go. Perfect. But yeah, she's not happy with that. The fact that Mel Gibson won 5 Oscars. Yeah, not very happy about just the whole childhood sweetheart, love of his life thing. She has a go at that, and yeah, she has a go at the film's depiction of women as well, which I guess is accurate in terms of it didn't depict women that well, but I guess in history were they treated that well? Probably not. So yeah,
women. It's history, not her story.
Exactly. So yeah, at the end of the day, she says, taking his cue from a famous battlefield scene Gibson did with Braveheart, the cinematic equivalent of lifting his kilt and waving his chauvinism around. The response then, as now, is, "Do you put it away, dear?" She puts that in quotes, so I decided to do a Scottish accent.
Oh, did you? Wait, hold on. Oh, you know what? Actually, we should have spoken about this. Did you hear the recent, I don't know when I'm going to mention this, I don't know if I'm even going to be able to get it in, but, because obviously we can't really do the quality, but there's a really funny story. It was recently revealed, obviously you know how Scots is a language, there's a language called Scots.
Yes.
basically, obviously, Wikipedia has different versions of Wikipedia for many different languages, and it was recently revealed that the Scots version of Wikipedia has been edited. Something like 60% of all articles are solely authored by one account based in America, where all of their contributions have been written not in the language of Scots, but rather in English, phonetically spelled out in a Scottish accent. And it's really funny. See, the thing is, obviously, what's annoying is now it's all been pointed out. They probably changed it loads. But I was like reading some of the articles. It was so funny because it was literally like, it was like pretending it was a different accent. And all it was just English written in a Scottish, like, phonetically in a Scottish accent. So instead of like, no, it was like, nay. And it was brilliant. But yeah, obviously, I don't know.
That is a shame. That is great. Because who really cares at the end of the day about?
I know. Yeah, who cares about Scots?
Yeah, all about Scotland in general, really. No, but that's the thing. Like she says, basically, Braveheart as well offered this a kind of unrealistic view, and that is completely correct, of Scottish history, and a generation of Scots grew up in love with the romantic notion of independence. Which, again, I don't think is necessarily true, or certainly not why the majority of Scottish people who voted for independence wanted independence. Maybe the bedrock of the independence movement was helped by this, like, oh, yeah, let's go Scotland, we're the best. But, yeah, not really based on, the exit polling from the referendum in 2014. And even today, Scottish independence has never been more popular. And there's no coincidence that it comes at a time when, Brexit's going to happen and Boris Johnson has a Tory majority, a comfortable Tory majority. The first time that's happened since this movie came out, and he doesn't seem too keen on Scotland either. That is the case, judging by his policies and his kind of English nationalistic kind of direction or agenda. So that is I think overall it's not Braveheart isn't the reason why Scottish independence has been talked about a lot. But definitely that in some Scots' eyes, even it flies in the face of all logic, and they acknowledge it. They just like the movie. So, and I can sympathise with that, I guess. But what do you think of all this, Michael?
No, I mean, basically, I can. I think it's an interesting situation where it's like you have bad depictions of. See, the thing is, I would say this: I don't think Scotland is so underrepresented that they need to rely on bad depictions of their history. It's kind of weird because I'm thinking about this, but obviously, we should say, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman died, and I say that because I was remembering there was obviously lots of people when Black Panther came out who were saying, well, Black Panther is just a stupid generic Marvel film, so how can that be? Are we really going to celebrate just boring, stupid, cookie cutter Marvel films as these big moments? And obviously the response was
probably the best Marvel film as well. I'll say that.
Yeah. But obviously the response was, well, the point is that black people have historically not had these massive blockbusters, and obviously, I mean, you can find holes in that, but they've not had these. Black Panther is a very black-led franchise, and obviously it's not Moonlight or something like that, but not every film has to be an artist film. I can kind of see how that's happening with like the Braveheart argument. It's like, well, not every film has to be a Trainspotting, but it's nice to have a very widely successful film that has a Scottish audience. And I would kind of say
Scottish people being marginalised, though. Can you use the
that's
same
the thing.
argument?
That's kind of where I think it's, because I think Scottish people don't really have to be in that position. Like Scottish people can, you can deserve better. I feel like Scottish people who like Braveheart is kind of like a woman who's with a guy who is not good enough for her, but she doesn't want to kind of acknowledge that the guy's not good enough for her, and you're like, oh honey, he's not treating you right. And that's kind of how I feel when I see like Scottish people. Well, sure, Braveheart, it's got a terrible accent, it's completely historically inaccurate, and it is basically just porn for Americans with a slight Scottish kink, but it made people like Scotland, kind of. And it's like, no, you don't have to do this. You can so I guess what I'm saying is I stand more on the side of the woman who's complaining about it. Although I would say in the grand scheme of things, like, chauvinism is probably not the primary charge I'd level against this film in particular.
Yeah.
But, that's just identity politics for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't say something's bad without making it an ism.
Okay. I don't really know. I've never been to Scotland, so I don't know about the relationship with Braveheart, but judging by what I can get from Wikipedia and judging by the articles I have read, I think it's best to describe the relationship with Braveheart that Scotland has as complicated. Really, that's probably the best thing for it. And it's it's 25 years ago, so who knows if people like even care about Braveheart now like they did back then. But yeah, certainly, I imagine in the English press, if there's another Scottish independence referendum, there will be references to Braveheart and so on, which again is simplifying the matter a great deal, I think. Like I've said. But anyway, let's get on to the depiction of the English. And speaking
what fun.
of the English press, well, yeah, I mean, look, our press are kind of insane as it is. I just imagine if this was released today and not in the mid-1990s, the amount of flag Twitter people who would be calling for a boycott. I mean, you've seen recently about this BBC Proms thing, not singing Land of Hope and Glory, how that's become a thing that's gone on for almost 2 weeks. The press is constantly frothing at anything that is seen to diminish England or Britain. So this movie, which certainly does that, wow, that right now that would definitely get some very scathing articles written about it, Braveheart, if it was released today. But it did still back in the day as well. So in the Times, Colin MacArthur said, the political effects are truly pernicious. It's a xenophobic film. Wow.
Oof.
Ian Burrell of The Independent noted, the Braveheart phenomenon, a Hollywood-inspired rise in Scottish nationalism, has been linked to a rise in anti-English prejudice. No surprise that they're going down this path. And also The Economist called it xenophobic. Sections of the English media also accused the film of harbouring Anglophobia. And John Sutherland, writing in The Guardian, stated that Braveheart gave full rein to toxic Anglophobia. So the English are very unhappy with their depiction of this film. And look, I don't think that any of that actually happened. Like, I don't think the Scottish people looked.
I don't.
Sorry, we'll go on.
I can't say that I've noticed anything myself either.
Yeah, but it is kind of hilarious how the English are portrayed in this movie. They're like gay rapists. That is basically.
I know, yeah.
They're gays and they're rapists. And they look down upon the Scottish people, which I guess you could say, yeah, that would be the case. But yeah, they're not portrayed very well. But yeah, all this talk about, it's Anglophobia. I mean, what the fuck even is that Anglophobia? Like, have I ever been abused for being English? No, I have not. Not by a Scottish person, not by any other person that I can think of. So yeah, I don't think that this movie is responsible for that. I have to say. And again, this was back in the 1990s. What the press is like today, I think, is much more. Ever since Brexit, it seems like that they're on this sort of drug with they have to angrily react to anything that is a slight slight against Britain or England. So yeah, like I said, if this came out today, oh my god, people would be really, really mad. So what do you think, Michael, about that? Do you think this movie did promote Anglophobia? I'm guessing not.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, I noticed that it did seem to... see, the thing is, it's kind of a situation where obviously there's the scene where the French, I guess, maid kind of says, Englishmen don't know what to do with their tongues. And...
you found that offensive?
No. But I think it was kind of... I remember thinking that being okay, it's funny. But the thing is, obviously, the problem is they're French, so of course they'd say that. That's kind of the thing. Basically, the issue is, well, if you're going to make a film about Scottish people and, a French woman, well, it kind of makes sense they're going to dunk on the English.
Yeah, and
so,
here's
that's
the thing as
just,
well.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, which is pretty important. I don't think William Wallace ever goes on a rant specifically about the English, calling the English certain names and so on.
Yeah, he's attacking the elite establishment, Trump style.
He just talks about Scotland and freedom all the time, and the Scottish people.
Yeah.
He never specifically goes after the English. He doesn't specifically hate England. He's just well, these are the people that are occupying us, so let's fucking beat them. There's never any hate for the English that you get. There isn't a time in the movie where people are sitting around a fire in between battles and talking about how fucking stupid the English are, or how cowardly they are, or anything like that. There is nothing like that. So yeah, it's just British people once again proving that they are incredibly sensitive to any attacks.
But I say they hate us because they ain't us.
Yeah, I should say English people. Obviously, I'll specify English people. They're very, very sensitive to any attacks on them. And again, I think it would just be worse today. They would be even more sensitive given the political context we are living in today. So now, Michael, let's talk about the Oscars. Did this movie deserve to win Best Picture? Quick, yes or no? Go. Oh, right, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, so it's well ahead of the curve there.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know what else was on the cards, but I'm going to look it up.
Apollo 13, Leaving Las Vegas,
oh, yeah.
Sense and Sensibility, The Usual Suspects. All better movies, I would say.
Yeah, they are all, yeah. They should have gone for Sense and Sensibility. There we go. That's a film about romance. So
yes. Interestingly, I can't remember where I saw it, but I did see this on Wikipedia. This movie was voted the best movie of 1995, I believe, by Empire readers. And then in 2005, it was voted as the worst movie to win Best Picture by Empire readers. So
Empire readers are very fickle.
Yeah, well, that's what people are. They're very fickle. They're just oh, look at this hype around this movie. It's a 3-hour war epic. Mel Gibson, is, the most famous it's ever been. This is when the Oscars cared about big movies as well, winning, and studios went for Oscars with big movies like this, for instance. And so that it all made sense in 1995, I guess, why this movie did so well. Like, looking back, it may seem a bit weird, like Braveheart, but it's the same as Gladiator, I guess. It's like, oh yeah, this movie doesn't really deserve it, but because of the time in which it was being shown out in the cinemas when it was released, like, people liked this kind of thing. This is what won Best Pictures. Historical war epics and big actors actually trying with these movies. And not just doing like superhero movies like is the case nowadays. I think we can look back and say, lol, how stupid, like I guess the Empire readers did back in 2005. Like, lol, what a ridiculous win. Best Picture, Braveheart, are you kidding me? But yeah, like, they voted for it as the best movie in 1995 because that was what was popular back then. That was how I'd sum it up. What do you think?
No, yeah. I basically agree with you. I think ultimately it's just a sign of the times, and yeah, overall, I don't even. I think the thing is, at this point, like, what did not win at Best Oscar, it's almost scarcely even interesting, especially back in the past. I mean, if it's like a new thing, it's kind of exciting, but in this case, and also it's kind of like, it didn't really win an Oscar for like any offensive reason, or like reason that's
it's not like Driving Miss Daisy, is it?
Yeah, or Crash or something like that.
So again, it's really bad that it won, I guess, because it's not that great a movie, but that was what people like back then. People like these kind of movies. So there you go. Let's move on to the conclusion, Michael, and I segue, I guess, talking about whether it deserved the Best Picture. We both said no. How did it rank overall? So do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I do want to go first. So, yeah, here's the thing, guys. I like to say, is it this fantastic work of art? No, not really. There are some things to appreciate in terms of how the action is shot and how interesting it is. But having said that, there are other films which you can watch that would have the same effect. So I guess, in some sense, if you've exhausted every other if you've exhausted every kind of like sword and sandals, I don't know what the medieval equivalent to sword and sandals is, but I don't know, stirrups and scabbards, then you can watch this, I guess. But it's not like overly exciting. There are some massive issues with the characterization, and then on top of that, there is the fact that it is basically just misleading you historically, and that's kind of not as interesting. And also, I guess the other thing is that it's very one-dimensional with the characters. So the English people are all, and this isn't necessarily, this isn't to do with it being Anglophobic so much. I think it's just to do with it being boringly framed. All the English people are just irredeemably weak and rubbish and incompetent. All the Scottish people pretty much are just fantastic. I mean, there are some interesting Scottish people, like Robert the Bruce is a kind of interesting character, but certainly William Wallace is not an interesting multi-layered character. The only thing I can kind of say about this film, this is almost like saying it's good because it's good. It's kind of considered a classic, and as such, I think you should probably watch it simply because it's considered a classic. I would say, all things considered, I'm kind of feeling a 5. I could maybe give this a 6 if I was feeling generous, but I'm going to put it, I guess, above Fate of the Furious and below The Fugitive. So there we go, that's Braveheart.
I'll just quickly say, again, I think a 5 out of 10 is reasonable. That's what I'm going to give it. It's not offensively bad. Okay, it's historically inaccurate, but not in a way that looking back on is problematic, I guess is the word to use. Like some other movies that we have done or are going to do. Well, like Pocahontas, for instance, it's not problematic that it's historically inaccurate like that movie. But basically, what I get out of this kind of movie, because obviously the character arc, like we say, isn't there with William Wallace, and it is kind of there with Robert the Bruce. I was thinking, based on his character arc, he's a really interesting character, that this movie should have maybe been about Robert the Bruce, because he is more interesting. But I guess William Wallace allows Mel Gibson to show how tough he is and portray himself as Jesus at the end. So that's why it's about William Wallace. But anyway, I think, a historical retelling of a fascinating war for independence between Scotland and England would make it for a good movie, a good 3-hour epic. But that's not what this was. If it's not true, I just kind of look back and say, well, what's the point of this movie then? Is it some nice battle scenes? Is that it, really? And if that's the case, then fine. You like it, go for it. It's not a worse reason to like the movie, but I don't, like I said, like those battle scenes that much. They don't really tip it over the edge for me into being a good movie. So 5 out of 10 it is. And you said it's a classic. I mean, I guess it kind of is a classic, but it's just it's kind of a dud. of a movie.
Yeah, it's kind of memed a lot because of that. Never take off. Well, sorry, there's never take off freedom. And it goes the freedom at the end.
Freedom
so yeah, there's that
thing.
too.
Yeah, that is a meme for sure. Definitely was back in 2014. May well be again if Scotland decides to have another referendum on independence. But yeah, we have. Yeah, that's it then. That's it for Braveheart. We've done. So. Michael, we're not going to do receipts this week because we've gone on a bit long, so we're going to say that.
Yeah, this was long. Yeah, that was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Mel Gibson, I tell you what, it's appropriate because the film's so bloody long.
Yeah, exactly. So, what are we doing next week, Michael?
Next week, we are doing The Usual Suspects.
Yes, we are. Usual Suspects, like Braveheart, commemorating 25 years since it came out. So, yes, thank you for listening. We have been selecting and reflecting on Braveheart because of its 25-year anniversary. Who knows? Will it have an influence later on? In its life, Michael? Will it influence the hearts and minds of millions of people when it is played at 9 p.m. in Scotland the night before the next independence referendum? Yeah, maybe. But because it's 3 hours long, maybe people will switch off before it's over. I don't know. Maybe it needs to be broadcast at like 7 p.m. to get the full effect. So join us next week for The Usual Suspects. So have you been Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening and goodbye.
Goodbye.